Welcome in, everyone. Welcome to the, let's take our seats and end our conversations, please. If you can hear the sound of my voice, clap 1 time. If you can hear the sound of my voice, clap 2 times. If you can hear the sound of my voice, clap 3 times. Now everyone clap, because it's DenverScript. All right, welcome in, everyone. I appreciate your attention. Let's get into it. So first up, we're going to cover the code of conduct. And I'm going to give you just the bullet points, the highlights here. The full code of conduct is at denverscript.com/code-of-conduct. And here it is. So DenverScript is dedicated to providing a harassment-free community for everyone. Participants violating these rules may be sanctioned or expelled from the community at the discretion of the DenverScript organizers. If you're being harassed, notice that someone else is being harassed, or have any other concerns, please contact a DenverScript organizer immediately. Your organizers tonight are myself, CJ. We have Cass. We've got Chad on the cam. We've got Marlena, and also Will back there. So if you don't feel comfortable coming up in person, you can also email us, denverscript@gmail.com. But we are your organizers, and we're here to make sure everything goes smoothly. So here's some ground rules. First up is be kind. Don't talk over the organizers or speakers. Great. We're going to try to keep it like that all night. In between talks, of course, you can chat. Also, we're going to have a break in between probably our third talk, so you can keep networking and chatting and stuff like that. But if somebody's up here, give them all your attention, please. And during the Q&As, we ask that you ask constructive questions, and you don't try to prove a point or a gotcha on the speaker or anything like that. Keep it kind, and we'll have a good time. We are live right now, so that's the other thing. If you are going to be asking a question during the Q&A, make sure that you get the mic so that the live stream can hear you. And big thanks to our sponsors. So the space is sponsored by Code Talent. Yeah, give it up for Code Talent. Yeah. They are a technical talent agency, and they know the difference between Java and JavaScript. Yeah, that's it. And they're really good. So if you're looking for a job as someone searching, or if you are an employer that is trying to hire someone, definitely check out Code Talent, code-talent.com. And we're also sponsored by Sentry. So they provided the food tonight and Syntax.fm. Who here listens to Syntax.fm? There should be more hands up. So Syntax is a Tasty Treats podcast for web developers that's hosted by Wes Boss and Scott Talinsky. Syntax.fm. They publish 3 episodes a week, and it's how I stay up to date. So it's pretty slick. Definitely check it out. And Syntax recently joined Sentry. And who here has heard of Sentry? Who here uses Sentry? That's awesome. That's plenty of hands. But yeah, if you haven't yet, Sentry.io to learn about it. But it is error tracking and performance monitoring. So I actually have the Syntax FM Sentry dashboard up here. And so syntax.fm, it's the website that has all of our podcasts and like videos and everything listed. So it's a custom Svelte kit app, and when an error happens, we know about it. I literally get an email that cannot read undefined or of whatever. Like literally an error will pop up here, and then if I go into one of these errors, I can see a full stack trace all the way from the front end to the back end. So I can see what was happening in the back end code when something went wrong, and then what was happening in the front end code. I just realized I might leak an IP address, so I changed tabs there. Because it'll show you like the client that was interacting with the website. They also have a new thing on performance monitoring, so you can actually dial in and see all the database queries that are happening, and it'll show you how quickly they're responding, and also how often those database queries are happening. So it's really easy to start to dive in and figure out how to tune for performance, because you can actually tune the things that your users are actually using. So it's slick. Check out Sentry, Sentry.io, Syntax.fm. We appreciate them. All right. We're always looking for sponsors. So if you're a company that'd like to sponsor us, you can reach out, denverscript@gmail.com. You can also check out denverscript.com. And if you are looking to speak, we're always looking for speakers. So denverscript.com, you can submit your talk. And now we've got some JavaScript news with Marlena. Please give it up.
Awesome, thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Marlena. And we're gonna talk through the news real quick. I'm not gonna touch on everything I've got on here, but this full list of news links is available at denverscript.com, as well as our historic news segments. So let's talk about jQuery. I know it's everyone's favorite topic. But specifically, jQuery is concerned about the general state of jQuery on the web and how it presents security risks. That there are so many apps that have old and outdated jQuery implementations. And so they've decided to do something about it. And so they are providing migration guides, how to upgrade, and even tools to help you determine what version of jQuery is present on your app, because some of you may know it is not always the easiest thing to tell. And so I wanted to make sure that you were all aware that resource exists. Also, I ate the spicy salsa, so it's gonna be like this. It was delicious, but I'm in pain. Cloudflare workers now have JavaScript native RPC, remote procedure call, so that you can access workers more like functions than having to do like API style requests to access Cloudflare workers, which is pretty cool. All right, we'll come back to conferences. I loved Cass's, like, let's talk about that last and get excited. We have a whole lot of releases. Quill version 2. Sorry, I'm not used to actually having to do a full click. There's a pretty lengthy description of what has changed in Quill. We're seeing a lot more TypeScript in all of these libraries. Oh my gosh, I'm in so much pain. I'm so sorry. Let's see, we've got Gulp version 5. Oh God, medium, I'm sorry, but no. No. No, 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 no. No? Okay, great. So dependency tree was a main concern. Keeping things light on the web is always going to be a struggle. It's always going to be, we push further with the tooling we have, and then we need to cut back on what we're actually delivering to the browser. And so there's some good stuff in here. And then Vite and VitePress, you know we're fans. So then I wanted to talk about resources because there's some really fun stuff. This Substack just posts tech talks, and I discovered it recently, and there's a list of all JavaScript conference talks from 2023 sorted by views, which is just pretty frickin' cool. So if you feel like you missed a lot of the conferences and talks that happened last year, you were busy with the job search or your job or anything else, like here's a great resource to go and see what people were talking about. And then like their Substack in general is pretty cool. I'm gonna open up 2 of these. I love deep dives, personally, like understanding how things work is always so fun. So I like this JavaScript visualized for promise execution. It's got all these great little GIFs and diagrams to help people understand how promises work, which is a thing that's often a struggle. So I thought that was pretty neat. Additionally, a great like dive into object structures in JavaScript engines. Okay. Like, there's so much that's being covered here. So, like, when I say deep dive, I mean deep. And then there's a great little article about Figma plugins. If you've ever used Figma, I love it because I'm design/code. Hyperformula is a headless spreadsheet for people like Kyle who spreadsheet everything. And then I'm way out of order, but Node.js, the documentary came out on Honeypot. If you're not familiar with Honeypot in general, they do all these really neat documentaries. So we've got Ruby on Rails, React, they did one on Vue. Obviously I know about that one because I'm a dork. Just something that you might want to check out when you've got some free time. And then I'm going to do a little you should know what other functions that your team do. So this is Product for Engineers, a blog that I found to talk about product topics, but aimed at engineers to help them understand what's going on in your project manager's brain. So those are just some fun resources that I found. Conferences. React Advanced Call for Papers is still open, but also React Summit US conference call for papers is open until July 1st. So if you're looking to give some talks, those are some options. That one's in London, this one's in New York. Upcoming Denver Dev Day will be May 31st. I believe that one's in the Tech Center. Yeah. I've been to that once, it's a good conference. VueConf US coming up in May, as well as ReactConf. And then, because I was excited because it's local, the North American Information Security Summit is going to be in Denver in June. So if you're interested in going to that, no travel costs. Anybody else have any news they want to throw out? CJ.
I will just mention really quick, we have a discount code for VueConf. So if you want to attend, I'll be there. So that's one reason to go. But also, I think you can get $100 off of a ticket. So come see me if you would like a discount code for VueConf.
Nice.
Yeah.
One sec.
Well, we have this one.
Oh yeah, the spatula.
Oh, just wanted to add the Rocky Mountain Information Security Conference is happening in Denver this June as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, at the convention
June, the
center
month of security.
downtown. I'll be speaking on AppSec.
Nice. I'll add that to the list. Thank you. Anything else? All righty. Well, that's it for the news. Thank y'all.
So for your talks, we're going to have Brooks up first. After that will be Kyle, then Will, then Leta, and then me. So I'll let you know if you're, as a speaker, if you're on deck.
All right, how does it sound?
All right, so Brooks is going to be giving a talk called Introducing the Helix Code Editor. So in this talk, Brooks will introduce the CLI editor that he's been using as his main editor for over a year, Helix. It's a great way to get started with CLI editors and doesn't need hundreds of lines of config to get going. So please give it up to Brooks.
All right, welcome, welcome. Thank you all for coming out here. And I don't know, I have not been to the DenverScript meetup in a long time, so I'm really happy to be back here. And talking about something that really is like the base on a lot of our coding journeys, which is the editor itself. And just out of a show of hands, how many of us use a CLI-based editor? Okay, so 3 of us or so. All right, so as a really quick, I guess like how many know of an editor that's CLI-based, like Vim? NeoVim? Okay, the less people. All right, so Helix is very similar to Vim, and it has the same sort of general idea. And I guess I should actually follow my slides here. So first, who am I? Well, I'm Brooks Patton. I am the founder of Brooks Builds, which is a show on Twitch and YouTube where I do live stream coding, I create tutorials, I am also a software engineer, and I basically just build a lot of things. And I've been using Helix as my main driver for, I don't know, a little bit over a year now. And I had been using NeoVim before then, and then VS Code before that, and then Atom before that, and then Sublime Text before that. But I think that's sort of like the pathway that a lot of us have used, or at least those of us who didn't go straight into VS Code. So what is this setup like? Because that's one of the big questions about terminal-based editors all the time. Because for those of you who have used Vim, or who may be like concerned about using Vim, is that there's a ton of setup. And you might hear about, I don't know, Kyle, how many lines of code did your NeoVim setup have at one point in time?
Holy smokes, many hundreds.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines of code in the configuration.
Down to about 16 now.
Well, yeah, but you use a configuration setup.
Correct.
So that doesn't count. This here is a lot simpler. So let's go over and take a look at my actual Helix setup here, which is, I'm in Helix, by the way. This out here inside the green rectangle is Helix. The outside of it is my window manager, which is called Zelige. That's not part of the talk. Maybe next time. So I've got 34 lines of editor code, or a configuration code here, and everything just sort of works the way I want it to. I have, for example, I have relative lines on, where it shows me, okay, I'm on line 17, but if I want to jump up, I'm 6 lines below this center here. I'm 3 lines above here. I like that a lot. If I go into interactive mode, now I see the full lines again, which is really nice. And I get that via this line number relative. That's just one line of code there, which is like an entire plugin that you have to do if you want that in NeoVim. So this is pretty highly configurable. And let's see. Let's take a look at how this looks if we were to open up a JavaScript app with it. And it actually looks very similar to how we would expect a VS Code app to look. We have, well, color highlighting. That's like the bare minimum that we'd expect. But we also have the types. The types are added in here in line, just like you can choose to have. And I do enjoy having them in line here so I can actually just see, okay, this task route is a router. This is JavaScript code, so it is figuring out what the types are based upon the TypeScript types that Express has behind the scenes. In fact, Helix ends up using the VS Code language server protocol most of the time. So it's actually just sort of works. To get this working, this is all the lines of code I needed to have it work with JavaScript and TypeScript. And the reason why I have to have this here at all is because I wanted the formatter to be different than the default formatter that TypeScript comes with. I wanted to use prettier. And so I basically put in here to say, okay, my language, I'm going to use TypeScript for everything except prettier. Use that. And also auto format on save. So I can come back here and make a change, hit save, and it just auto formats for me, which is great. The other thing is that Helix comes with themes built in, so you don't have to find an entire plugin and like build all, like add in all your themes. You can just type :theme and just sort of tab through them, take a look, find which one you want. It also uses the same type of themes that many other systems do, so if you have a theme you like from VS Code, you can drop it into a special directory and now you could just use it. Now, usage. If you've never used something like Vim, it might be a little bit odd to use. There's something called command mode and something called interactive mode. In command mode, you move around with actual letters. And this harkens back to the days in which keyboards had no arrow keys. And so we had to use HJKL, or no, HJKL in order to do that. I actually wrote this wrong here. What's slightly different though, and if you're familiar with Vim, which most of you are not, which is great, is that they changed around and simplified some of the commands for deleting and selecting. For example, if you want to select an entire line, you just press X. If you want to delete something, you press D. In Vim, D is going to be deleting, well, the entire line if you do DD, or you can do X to delete one character, or you can do D up to delete a line up. It gets weird. There's only one way to delete here, D. And something else that they have that's really nice, they have two different command menus. You could do the classic command menu, which is : and then you just have access to commands you can write, like I want to save, that's W. Hit return, okay, I saved the file. But you can also do space, and it opens up this nice little picker. And if I do a question mark, it opens up a command prompt exactly the same as the command prompt from VS Code. So if you want to know how to do something like, oh, I want to know how to move up, well, it tells me, K, right there. And if I go down and select it, it does move my cursor one up. So that's super nice to sort of like introduce anybody into the application. And we can have multi-cursors. So something really nice is that I can select the entire file with percent, and then S for select, and then I can just type, no, that only does one. Let's type use, and now I have multiple cursors that I can do whatever I want with, just like VS Code. So now, like for me, that's like a lot of the things that I want from VS Code. I actually set up a Docker container that containerized Helix, and we're actually using that here. You can see the command that I ran to get this. So that way you don't have to install Helix to use it on your own if you want to try it out. And it's decently performant. You are volume mounting your code into it. And the other thing is there is a file picker where I can do space F, pick some files. But after that, there's no file tree, unfortunately. So it's still under development. And that's what I've got.
We've got time for 2 questions or more. We have 2 minutes for questions. Who has questions?
So you said a lot of times that it was basically doing the same thing that VS Code does. What does it do better?
I would say the configurations are way, 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 way better. And there's a lot of sort of like VS Code type clones, but really all they're doing is creating config sort of groups where they're applying configurations for you behind the scenes. This is a brand new editor that's not just like a configuration pack. It's like it's like a brand new thing created. It's actually written in Rust. So it's like new code base, not trying to like change a very old code base and add on to it. And so because of that, the configuration ends up being very simple.
Good question. One more question? Yeah, go for it.
Is there anything that you really miss from other code editors that it doesn't have yet?
The file tree. So file pickers are great, but as you can imagine, as the application gets really big, I don't always remember the names of the files that I'm going into. And being able to okay, I want to go into DB and looking at I can type DB and go /, but having an actual visual look that I can go through. So instead, what I usually do now is Control Z to sleep Helix, and then I can open up Ranger or something else to look at the file tree that I have separately, and then go back into Helix from there.
Nice. Great question. All right. Thanks, Brooks.
All right, next up, we have Kyle, if you're ready, Kyle. All right. So Kyle Coberly is going to be giving a talk titled, "What Can You Do with Tests?" Either something about using tests for things other than verification, or a demo of how easy Playwright is to use. I'm sure he's going to tell you. So please give it up for Kyle.
Everybody. As of an hour ago, this talk is entitled Playwright in 5 Minutes. Hi, everybody. I am Kyle Coberly. I am a staff engineer over at Sunrun. I used to run an organization called Develop Denver, and before that I was the boot cramp guy. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Playwright. So Playwright is a browser automation and testing tool. And probably the best way to see just how easy this is to use is to dive right in. So I am going to make a repo real quick. We'll call this Playwright talk DenverScript, and I'll initialize a node project, and I'm going to npm install TypeScript and @Playwright test, and that's really all we need to get started. So the first thing I want to show you is Playwright Code Gen, which is a way to get a start for a test by just clicking around. So if I do npx playwright code gen, I get two windows open. First one is a browser. The second one is like a real-time, here's what your clicks would translate to in automation code. So I'm going to head over to DenverScript. And then I'm going to go to the activities page. And we have this learning resolutions for 2024. So I want to submit a reply. And you can see that it's building this out in real time as I go. So what am I excited to learn in the new year? Playwright. Any learning sources or tools you suggest to others? How about my talk? All right, and so then I'm going to submit that, and that actually for real went into their spreadsheet. Cool, so then I'm going to take this, and I can just copy that into an actual test file, and let's see what that looks like. So if I stop the code gen, I am going to make a test called DenverScript test.ts. I'm just going to paste that whole thing in. And then if I run this like this, check this out. If I do npx playwright test UI, it's going to open that up inside of this thing called the Playwright test UI runner. And so what's cool about this is if I do that, it's going to run those tests, and it's actually automating all of that, including the submission. Like, that's pretty slick, right? You can go back and see what this looked like at every point in this. You can see on a timeline. And we've got all the like network stuff. We've got any errors that were thrown, the console, like all that kind of stuff, right? So I don't want to hit the DenverScript like actual submission form if I want to test this. So if you go down this network tab and look for where the actual submission happened, which I think is that, yeah. So what we can do is we can take a look at that, and we can examine the response and the body that came back and all that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do is mock that out. So if I go into that test that I made, we can clean this up a little bit too, give it a real name. We can say that this was DenverScript, and this was the Google form promise, and this was the Google form. Makes it a little bit easier to keep track of what we're doing here. All right, looks good, looks good, looks good. Now before I actually like click that submit thing, I want to mock out that endpoint. So I'm going to go Google form.route, and this, it starts by taking the URL of the thing that I want to mock. So I could take this thing, paste it in, and then like, you want to make your tests like as resilient as you can. So like everything in between here and let's say here, I'm going to go, yeah, you know, whatever. And then the thing that I want to come back from that looks like this. So we'll take the route, and we'll say like take whatever the like stuff that we would be submitting there, we can like pull that out. So we could say like the values for my form submission are going to be do like an object.values on route request, and we'll grab the post data that we're sending over as JSON. And I just want to pull the values out of that. The reason I'm doing that is because the way that it sends it sucks. And so this was actually the easiest way to get it. And then I'm going to expect those values to contain, let's see, what did I say? Playwright. And then for this to really work, then I need to I also need to like tell it what to do with that request. I can make the expectation in there and pass it on. I could modify it and send something else back, or I can just say, you know what, don't actually make the request. And if I did all of that right, I can run that again. And I've got passing tests, and it didn't actually hit the real API. Booyah, mic drop. That's me. Playwright in 5 minutes. Questions, what you got?
Any questions? I'll unmute it underneath. press the button.
I think it's working. First try. Okay. Questions? Yeah. Sorry.
Maybe a leading question here, but how do you structure this for like a CI environment where you want to target multiple?
Oh man, so glad you asked. So let's say we want to run this in CI. We can't just pull up the UI and like click play and shit, right? So what if I just do npx playwright test? What else?
Love it. Good question.
So is this, it's running like a headless browser, or is that what that's doing?
Yeah, and this is actually a cool thing. So that was headless Chrome, but you also have headless Firefox and headless Safari. And so you could do cross-browser testing with that also. If you did want to do visual diffing and that kind of stuff, it has a chromatic integration.
We do have time for one more.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Thank you all very much.
All right, next up is Will. We're gonna get set up. Check. All right. Your next talk is called Choosing a Database for Personal Projects with Will Klein. So the abstract is, how do we choose a database for personal projects? He'll walk through some popular options, how they approach evaluating, and how they get started building out the schema so you can start building as quickly as possible. Please give it up for Will Klein.
Hey everyone, so this is a problem that I was actually trying to figure out in the last day or so. I'm picking a database right now for a personal project, and we're having lightning talks. So I'm like, why don't I just share what I'm figuring out? A big part of this is actually learning in public. I'm going to ask for questions and suggestions at the end, and of course, come talk to me to discuss more as I figure this out. A little bit about myself. I was a full stack developer. I worked in design systems more recently, but I sort of like retired last summer to spend more time with my family, and now I'm a full-time dad. So I got some questions for everyone to poll everyone on where you're coming from. Who here would consider themselves full stack? You could work front end and back end and not hate your job. So that's like most of us. Okay, cool. Who would consider themselves just front end? Like just a little bit. There's like the smallest amount here. Who would consider themselves strictly back end? Cool. It's like just a couple of people for front end and back end. Everyone here is pretty full stack. That's awesome. Okay, so who here has picked a database solution, whether for a personal project or for work? Cool. That's like most of us. Awesome. Who has written database queries directly for the database? Also most people. Okay, cool. Who has like defined or edited the database schema, gone in, edited tables, columns? Wow, I've got all the experts here. This is awesome. So I can get some more ideas from all of you. Who has not done much with databases but would like to understand more? Cool, a couple people. All right, awesome. All right, so I'm going to walk through a few things I've used over the years. Going back to like 2005, 2006, I started with MySQL. I was that stereotypical PHP developer that wrote SQL queries, back-end code, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all in the same file. I've learned to do better, but you could say we do some of that with JavaScript nowadays as well. That's sort of come back in vogue in ways. I worked with Microsoft SQL Server. I got to play with MongoDB when that came out. That was like one of the first I shouldn't say first, but it had a big appeal to being easier to get started with and just start writing apps with, especially for small scale things. I've worked with Oracle at a couple big companies. No one was ever happy that years later, that was the decision and wanted to move to something else. I also play with Firebase with personal projects, maybe about like 5 or 6 years ago. That was pretty popular, and that's Google Firebase now. And then working at a big company, I got to work with MySQL again. That's probably where I used at the greatest of scale, where there's millions of records across all the tables. And I happened to use that with something called Connects.js and Bookshelf.js, which is a query builder and an ORM to make that easier. More recently, I spun up a pet project with Supabase, because I'd heard about good things about that, and I wanted to try it and see the latest and greatest in just cloud providers and getting started. And if I may admit, after I wrote all my schema and my tables in Supabase, I realized I really didn't have much to update. Most of my stuff was read-only, and I just threw my data into JSON files. I actually found like a GraphQL API out in the cloud that was providing most of the data I needed. So I just wrote some GraphQL queries that I saved, and then I like go and fetch the data I need and put it in JSON files. And then I just sent that to my client, and that was all I needed just to do most of what I did. So all these are sort of options, but I'm going to talk about a few more and some of the things I think about. So definitely some factors. There's like, what is the underlying database? There's the SQL ones like PostgreSQL, MySQL, and such. There's also thinking now about what provider you use. Are you hosting this on Google Cloud or AWS? Or are you going to use a more like bespoke provider like, let's see, I'll get to some of those, but like Supabase. All right, halfway, awesome. Am I going to spend a lot of time writing queries? What does that look like? Or am I going to work more with an ORM that's going to kind of handle that for me and give me something that's a little bit easier to use potentially? Do I care if it's relational or document model? I will say, I remember when document model came out and MongoDB was all the rage. I remember looking at it like, this looks helpful for some things, but I felt it was a bit overblown, and we've kind of come so full circle where we're very hot on relational again. And most of the problems I've solved have been very relational oriented, where defining tables made a lot of sense. There's also potentially real-time capabilities where you can have things work really well with mobile and having push notifications and things like that. And there are extras that some of these providers give us, like authorization, authentication, file storage. And I'm still figuring out what a vector database is. I haven't really had the problem that it's trying to solve, I think, but that's just good to mention. So I mentioned MongoDB. I also want to mention, somebody pointed this out to me for my pet project that I sent everything down to the browser. I started to need a richer solution for querying the data, and that's where IndexedDB seemed like a really good solution for me to look at if I wanted to just construct a data model in the client side and just do things there. So that's built into every browser, and that's worth looking at. And then I'm seeing that things are often built on SQLite, PostgreSQL, and of course MySQL these days. A lot of the things I've been evaluating seem to be just something on top of that. All right, providers. I'm going to whip through this a little bit quickly, but I'm just going to plug a couple things I've been hearing about lately. So I mentioned Supabase. I've played around with this. I've used their schema builder. And I'm not making any recommendations. I'm not affiliated with anyone. Just kind of sharing some notes here. This is something I'm really going to look at and look at again and play around with some more. Another one I heard about recently on, I think, the Scaling DevTools podcast, they interviewed somebody who worked on this, Terso. This is SQLite for production. So Terso is a provider that enables a bunch of things to make it easier to work with that and have the hosting for it all handled for you. There's also Zeta. This one's built on Postgres. And if you go into any of these and you kind of like scroll down, you start to see some of the things they bundle with it, like serverless Postgres. And they often will link out to like, oh, they've made it easy to deploy on AWS or Google Cloud, and they've got all these guides. I'm just trying to like navigate all that and see what looks easy. Another one that's very popular is Prisma. And I actually have looked at the least of this, and I think it's one of the more popular ones. All right, finally, I should mention for ORMs, actually this page is out of date. Connects isn't, Bookshelf was the ORM, but that hasn't been touched in 3 years, so I'm not going to say anything much more about that. Prisma is also an ORM and has that capabilities rolled in. And there's another project I discovered called Drizzle ORM. And TypeScript sounds great. TypeScript ORM. This seems pretty early and new, but it looks like it plugs into a lot of these other things. I got 1 minute, awesome. So that's something else I'm going to play around with. So about that, I think about my goals and what am I trying to do, and ultimately, I want this to be fun for myself, to build like something that people use, and I want to ship really quickly. So I'm going to be going through the docs and looking, just trying a couple things, looking what reads really readily. I care a lot about like, how do the docs read? I evaluate lots of tech based on that. If I like the docs, I'm probably going to have a good time. And I'll also visit the communities, jump on the Discords, see how questions are getting answered more quickly. I'll usually look at other questions before I ask my own. And ultimately, I'm just going to try it. It's not too important what you're choosing for a pet project. The worst thing you can do is move to something else. I definitely do consider the flexibility of, if something's built on Postgres, I can probably migrate to another Postgres provider and all that. Again, read the docs, check out the community, and yeah, are there any questions? Or suggestions?
We have time for a couple of questions. Ooh, got one in the back. Coming to you, Trenton.
Are there any docs that just wowed you for a provider?
Ooh, any docs that have wowed me? I wouldn't say, not recently. I guess I could say that of all my experiences, the time I spent with Firebase was, I guess, underwhelming. And I'm not sure if that was the docs, and it's been a few years, but everything else I've looked at has all been pretty nice. I think the game for documentation is really high these days, especially for all these commercial solutions. They're not going to be successful unless they have really good docs. But I'll see if I have an answer for you in a couple weeks. So ask me again next month.
All right, one more question.
Almost the opposite take on that. Were there any that maybe have a lot of buzz, and when you got into the docs and playing with it, you're just going, okay, maybe it's just me, but I don't really see what the buzz is all about with this one?
Yeah, that would probably be Firebase, and I think like it was really popular a few years ago, and now it's still like pretty big, but that wasn't. I was just sort of underwhelmed with it, but nothing really was bad about any of these so far.
Nice. Last question.
Did you say you went through this process for a personal project? And if you did, what would you end up choosing?
Oh, sorry, what was the first part?
Did you say you went through this process for sorting out a personal project the
Yeah.
last 2 days?
Yeah, so I'll back up a little bit. The most recent one I built was in December. I spent a lot of time building a personal project, and I just went with Superbase initially. That's the one I ended up doing JSON files for, but I just didn't think too hard about it. I just jumped into it really quickly because I was building it primarily for myself. And I thought maybe other people will use this someday, but that was really low on my priority list. The current project I'm working on now that I'm starting, I very much have a goal of getting in the hands of users, so I'm paying a lot more attention to, like, I'm actually going to evaluate a couple different tools and try a couple different things. And frankly, when I find one that I like, I'll probably just go with it, because it's honestly not that much of a focus for me. The data throughput and the data model shouldn't be that complex. So as soon as I find something I'm happy with, I'm just going to run with it. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right, we're going to do a 7-minute break, and then Leta is up with her talk. So 7 minutes, grab some food, grab a drink, use the restroom, 7 minutes. This is your 2-minute warning. 2 minutes to grab food, drinks, finish up your conversations. We're getting started in 2 minutes. Thirty-second warning. 30 seconds to take your seats. Getting started in 30 seconds. right, thank you, everyone. Give yourselves a round of applause. That was great. We're right on time. All right, next up we have Leta Keane giving a talk called Better Living Through Git Hooks. So let Git Hooks make your life easier. From linting code to automating tests, Git Hooks can help you save time and energy with every commit. Let's give it up for Leta Keane.
That's me. I keep getting distracted because there's two little blue lights underneath the wind cover. I feel like there's a hidden creature looking at me. It's great. So hello, I'm Leta. My pronouns are they, them, and she, her. And I work as a front-end engineer at the National Renewable Energy Lab. So yes, today we're going to learn about Git hooks, which are separate from GitHub Actions, which are part of GitHub. This is part of Git, so it's in pretty much every project that you ever work on. So what we're going to talk about is whenever you run git init or use some sort of packaged like Vite or something like that, you're going to have this little dot prefixed git directory in your file. I don't know if you've ever taken the chance to look over it. It's full of very cool magic things. So this is where the magic happens. We have a directory full of things, hooks, info, objects, refs. What this is going to include is pretty much all the information from your Git actions. So it has records of the commits you've made, a record of the head of your project, config tooling, all sorts of things. But what we're going to focus on is that hooks folder. So just to take a second, what are some of the things that you try to do before you commit or push your code? Like, what are some things that you know as a good human you should be doing, but don't always do? Writing tests, running tests maybe, linting, sorry. Remove console logs, yes, exactly. Sometimes we forget, we get busy, we just want to get our code committed. So I don't know about you, but my projects tend to have a lot of commits that read like remove comments, remove dead code, run test, fix something. We can save ourselves the problems by using Git hooks. So Git hooks, they're little bits of code that run at different points in the commit lifecycle. We can use them to do things like running our tests automatically for us. A lot of us use CI tools that run our tests for us, but we have to wait for the whole build configuration to kick off before we find out, oops, our tests aren't passing. To save us some of that time, we can write a Git hook that runs our tests for us before it commits. It's amazing. We can use them to standardize our commit messages. This one is, for someone like me, this is something I care a lot about, and you can use this as reminders to be like, is this using imperative voice? Did you capitalize your message? Things like that. We can include scripts to lint our code for us, which is, decreasingly important as we're using a lot of frameworks that have a lot of enforced linting in place. But in case you're on a team that doesn't, you can have a Git hook that runs your linting for you. Basically, it just makes sure that we're being a good person. So there's a lot that I can do. We're just going to go over a brief example. So the commit lifecycle, we're going to go over it in some detail here. We have the pre-commit hook. This happens after you run npm commit. Sorry, not npm. This happens after you run git commit, but before the lifecycle really kicks off. Then the lifecycle will automatically generate a commit message. So if you don't actually supply one, there is one already auto-generated. The next hook that occurs is prepare commit message, and this runs before you create your message, and it can be used to edit things like you can edit the automatically generated message, merge messages, things like that. And then the commit message is actually made. That's when you've supplied one. There's another hook called commit message. Commit message can be used to verify that your message follows a desired pattern. You can use a regex, things like that. And then we finally have our post commit, which runs after the commit cycle completes. You can use this for things like kicking off other scripts. Maybe you can build in an automatic deployment to your CI tool or something like that, pushing to a remote, forking something over, whatever you want. So let's write a pre-commit hook Okay, the code here doesn't matter. We have some code, we made an edit to it. What we're gonna do, so don't worry about the code. When I originally wrote this back in 2018, I had just learned about currying and was very excited, so the code does not matter. So we've refactored some code. I'm going to go into this hooks folder, which, fun fact, is full of Git hooks already. They have this .sample at the end of it. You can just delete .sample from the file name and use it. They're full of sample Git hooks, which is why they're called samples. So there's a lot of great stuff in there you can research and find out, what could I do here? We're gonna go into this pre-commit hook, and we're gonna replace the info in there with just a script like we would run in our shell. This one, I'm just saying, hey, we're gonna run our tests. Let's run our test script. What we're going to see is a GIF of what happens when everything works fine. What basically is gonna happen is when we try to commit, what's first going to happen is we're gonna run our tests. So what you'll see here, we're saying, hey, commit. We've refactored some of our code. Try to do it. We're gonna see our tests have passed, and when we run our status, we've made our commit. Great, the commit has completed. So basically that's saying, we are gonna try to run our code, or run our tests. When it happens, okay, go ahead and carry on with that commit. What we're gonna see next is what happens if my code doesn't pass my tests because I forgot to run them, I didn't do my due diligence. Same thing, we're kicking off our commit. It's going to automatically run our tests. The test will fail, and when we run our status, we'll see that the commit did not happen. So that pre-commit hooks, if our tests fail, will not complete that commit at all. So now you don't have to have like a second commit saying, whoops, I gotta clean that up. It just prevents the whole process from occurring. It's very cool, I think it's great. And for someone who compulsively uses Git status, even when I'm not attempting to do anything with Git, this is really helpful because it visually shows you, hey, something went wrong, you gotta check something out. Overall, Git hooks, they make your life easier. They make it easier to follow good conventions that will make your code base and your team time better used. If you want, you can go to thatpersonfromthething.com to get to my personal site. And if you're interested, I have recently on LinkedIn started doing a blog series about interviewing skills. So if you're out there on the job hunt, check it out. All right, thank you.
All right, we've got time for a few questions. Any questions, y'all?
Is setting up the server side Git hooks pretty much similar to client side?
Yes, basically those Git hook files are just available. They're defined for every part of the Git hook of the Git cycle, the commit cycle. So you can just go in there, add whatever code you want, including backend code if you'd like. If you are like, let's make sure we're doing this check every time we commit something, you can just dump the code there. You don't have to write bash, but you can. You can basically put whatever you want in there.
Cool. Do you have any favorite or unique things you've done with Git hooks?
Not really. I'm not interesting. I just like to make it run my tests for me. But yeah, CJ.
We have a question in the live chat. So,
Ooh.
yeah.
What an honor.
Vivian River is asking, I work at an org without a CI/CD pipeline. Would setting up Git hooks be a good step towards a CI/CD pipeline?
Absolutely. In my mind, a lot of CI/CD is really, I think for me, the biggest Git win that CI gives you is that it automatically runs your build and your tests. One of the benefits is that it's on servers more like production, but if you run it locally, that's a better step. And so yes, configuring it to run a build, run your tests before doing a commit is a great step to show you or prevent you from shipping code that hasn't been tested.
Last question?
Yes, I've seen some rumblings of a AI-generated commit message based on your changes. I would imagine it can hook into this. Have you tried that before?
I have not tried that. I probably have read too much science fiction and I'm very afraid of AI. And I also have a writing background, so I'm also very snobby about the things that AI writes. But I imagine it could be really useful, especially because we're not always the best at tracking the changes that we've made. So I'm sure you could use this in conjunction with an AI-generated commit message. But you should play with it, Jetter, and then show us all about what it's like. Yay, cool. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Next up is CJ. CJ will be giving us a talk titled, You Should Be Using Maps and Sets. Maps and sets were introduced in ES 2015, but many developers still don't use them. In this talk, CJ will show real-world examples of when and where you can start using maps and sets today.
Check, 1, 2, check, 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 check. Can you hear me in the back? Sweet, let's do it. So, as was said, this talk is You Should Be Using Maps and Sets. So my name is CJ. You can find me on GitHub as W3CJ and on Discord and a few other places. On Twitter, I'm coding_garden, and my email is cj@knoll.computer. That is a real internet address. I am the organizer of this meetup. You probably see me like running the live stream and stuff like that. And I also am the host of a show called Coding Garden on Twitch and YouTube. You can find that there. And I am recently a senior creator at Syntax FM. At Sentry. And so Sentry.io to learn more. They're a sponsor of this meetup, so we appreciate them. And also check out our YouTube, because I'm making YouTube videos for the Syntax team, so check that out. All right. This talk is actually based on some of the stuff that was talked about in episode 689 of Syntax. So definitely after this talk, you're going to be primed and ready to go listen to episode 689, so check that out. All right, we're going to start first with the problem with objects and the case for maps. So let's say we have this object. It's called books by ID. It's got a few books in it. We have a book with ID 42, ID 7, ID 13. Take a mental snapshot of this, because we're going to use it on the next slide. So really, you just need to know ID 42, ID 7, ID 13. All right. Let's say we have a function called getBook. It accepts an ID, and we want to return the book at that ID. And in this case, we're using bracket notation. And we are passing, in this case, the ID 42. Who thinks this code will return the book with ID 42? Raise your hand if you think this is going to work. 2 people? Okay, it's going to work. Yeah, why wouldn't it? We get back the book with ID 42. Okay, here's another one. We pass in the string 42. Is this going to give us back the book with ID 42? Raise a hand if you think it will. You gotta be more confident. Be the JavaScript engine. Okay, 3 people, yeah, it's gonna work, of course. So you might have thought, well, maybe it needs to be a string, maybe it doesn't, because actually when you pass a number in, it gets coerced to a string, and under the hood, that's actually what's getting passed in. So we define our object, it looks like this. Our keys are our syntax highlighter, it's showing us them as numbers, but in actuality, they're actually getting defined as strings because the keys on objects can only be strings, or also symbols, but we don't talk about symbols, but strings, right? Yeah, so even when you're setting it with bracket notation, even when you're defining it, your keys are just strings. So what's gonna happen when I pass this in, right? So we're asking to grab the constructor. Does anybody know what we're gonna get? What do you think? Constructor. What constructor? I'll accept it. Yeah, exactly, the object constructor. And that's because the object that we created actually inherits from the object prototype, right? So like when you ask for a property with bracket notation, it's gonna look at the object first. It's gonna see, well, yes, I have 42, 7, and 13, but you're looking for constructor, let me look at my parent prototype, and then it finds constructor there on the object. So that's what we have to be careful of when we use that bracket notation. So typically, you write code that looks like this, right? So does the object have this own property? And so has own property doesn't look up the prototype chain. It only looks at this object itself. So when you use this method, it'll work just fine because it doesn't look up the prototype chain and it's only looking at this. So if you ask for the constructor, it'll just get back undefined. Cool. But it's possible to create an object with no prototype. Has anybody ever used object.create? One guy? Two, 3, 4? Okay, yeah, a few of us. But you can actually create an object that has no prototype. So that line up there, object.create null, that's creating an object with no prototype, and then we're assigning all of the other keys and values onto it with object.assign. And so what's gonna happen now if we have books by ID and it has no prototype? So we defined books by ID, it has no prototype. We're trying to use this hasOwn property function. Does anybody know what's going to happen or what kind of error we're going to get? What do you think? That's close. Yeah, I think that's it. But does anybody know the exact error? Like that's you're in the ballpark. We'll give it to you. Yeah, books by ID.hasOwn property is not a function. It's not a function, right? So what we literally did is we chopped off the prototype. We set the prototype to null. So now it has nothing that it can look at. So hasOwn property isn't a function. Plain and simple. So the fact that we can do this makes it so that you see code that looks like this in a code base. Who has seen this in a code base before? Probably most of us, yeah. So basically it's this guard check to check against all this stuff. So basically what we're doing is we're grabbing hasOwn property, which exists on object prototype, at least it should. If it doesn't, something has seriously gone wrong. But we're getting the real hasOwn property, and then we're calling it on books by ID and passing in the ID. And this, you see this in code bases all over the place. And you see it so much actually that they did actually introduce a helper function called hasOwn. So you can use this now, and it does all that under the hood. But all of this to say, this is a talk about maps, right? All I want to say is if you see this bit of code in your code base, this is a perfect use case for a map. So let's talk about it. To create a map, you can create an instance of it, and then it has a set method. You can pass in the key and the value. And so now we have essentially put the key 42 and the value of that book onto that map. There is another method called has that will return true or false. So if we pass in 42, it's going to give us back true. If we ask for a constructor, it's not looking up the prototype chain. It's literally looking to see, does it have this key? And it doesn't, so it returns false. There's also the keys have a specific type, right? So when we set the key as the number 42, later on if we ask for the string 42, it's just going to say false. No, I don't have that, because the keys are explicit and it's going to check the type as well. So that is another reason why we should use maps. And it also, of course, has a get method. So if I want to grab that thing out of there with the ID 42, I can get it back. So yeah, maps are slick. And they work really well with TypeScript. So you can actually type the key and the value. So in this case, I'm saying keys must be numbers, values must be this book type. And then you can see that error down there. I have a squiggly line under WAT because it's like, hey, that needs to be a number, but you're passing in a string. So it works really well with TypeScript as well. And if you want to construct them, you actually can pass in an array of arrays. So you pass in an array, and then each nested array has a key and a value inside of it. So for instance, if we wanted to add that same book in here, we could pass in the key 42 and then the value of the book itself. And this is a nice way to kind of just instantiate it with our values. But in your code base, you're probably dealing with data you got back from an API. So like, let's say we have a list of books, and we want to turn this list of books into a map. We can pass it into the constructor, and use the map method on the array, not to be confused with the map object. So the map method returns a new array, and in that new array, we want an array of nested arrays. So for every book, we will return an array that has an array with the first value being the book ID, the second value being the book. So this is a nice little one-liner that'll take that big old array and turn it into a map that I can now use. So yeah, it just works, gives us back a map, great. Our code from earlier gets a whole lot simpler, right? So we don't have to have all those checks. We can literally just use this .get method. We don't run into the issue of asking for a constructor or strings, and we can just get things that actually have that ID. Okay, so when to use maps? If you need to dynamically look up items by a key, if you need to dynamically create a key value pair, if you need keys to be a specific type that are not just a string. All right, I'm running super low on time, so I'm just gonna blaze through the problem with arrays in the case for sets. So let's say you have an array of book IDs, you're implementing some kind of cart system, and we're using this includes method to basically search through the array to see, is that book ID inside of the array? And this works perfectly fine, but the thing I want you to be aware of is includes. So when you use the includes method on an array, it literally has to search through the whole array, and it's actually like we wrote the code like this, right? We're searching, we're looking at every value, is it the thing we're looking for? And if it is, return true. If we made it all the way, and it wasn't returned false. And you might be saying, yeah, that's fine, there's only 3 items in the array, but what if there's a million things in the array? This is what you want to look out for, and so this is a perfect use case for a set. So sets are super simple. Pass it into the set constructor, and now you have a set. One of the cool things about them is that they only allow for unique values. So you could even try putting in another 42, you're only gonna get 142 in there. And they have constant time lookup. So if I say, is 42 in here? It's a constant time thing. It doesn't have to search through the whole thing. So if you have a code base and you have that include somewhere, perfect use case for it. We can use the has method, and it's just going to return true or false, and it works pretty simply. So when to use sets? You need to keep track of unique values. You need a constant time lookup of values, and this has been, you should be using maps and sets. Like I said, I'm CJ. These slides, github.com/w3cj/maps-sets, and it's using slide.dev. I just discovered it, and it's amazing. It's got cool animations and stuff. Thank you very much. We have time for one question. Only one. Anyone? Yeah. Do we have a? Oh, okay.
Wait, where's our question? Sorry.
Which is the better iterator?
The better iterator, like a map or a set?
Set versus an array?
Oh. That's a great question. I think you've stumped me, because I mean, I think you can technically iterate through a set. You can do like a for of, and it'll give you the values in the set. I guess I don't know what you mean by better. Is it faster, or I guess what are you asking?
Generally faster.
Don't know. Do you know? Do you know? I don't. Okay, yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you very much. Yeah. Cool. So we're gonna wrap up. We don't have. If you have more questions, come up to me afterwards. We'll have more time for that. Yeah, but I do want to say we have a meetup ready to go for next month. And is it Brendan? Yes. Brendan's gonna be giving a talk on why you shouldn't use the else statement. So that's next month on May 28th. We would love to see you here. Do we have any other announcements or thoughts from?
There's containers. Please take food.
If you want to take a burrito bowl home for tomorrow, please do. We have plenty of food. Anything else? Yes, so DenverScript.com, there is a link to submit a talk right here. We still need one more long talk. If we don't do another long talk, we could potentially get another short talk. A short talk, I think, is like 20 minutes or so. So please submit your talks. We'd love to have them. All right, thank you. See you next month.